If you're an OG, or have been on Exalted long enough, you may have heard of the name, or at least know of it, ZenoBlaze. In case you don't know who this is, ZenoBlaze is one of the most famous players on Towny Exalted, and he was the museum curator of /T-Spawn Museum, and eventually set up a deal with the owner to create the /Warp Museum that is in place today. ZenoBlaze, however, is no longer with us sadly, but nevertheless, his legacy lives on, and so this biography will be dedicated to him, showing his history from when he joined to when he was blacklisted. ZenoBlaze's beginnings took place on a server previous to MineSuperior. He played on a server called A1 Craft, in which he created his own builds and even started his first museum. He was invited to MineSuperior by a now ex-staff named Shrew Radical. And from there, ZenoBlaze went to the only Towny server that was available at the time in 2017, and began his outstanding and incredible journey of Repair MC MMO grinding. This grinding operation was done in his first town named Stalingrad, which he made during the first week of his visit. Of course, this little town lasted until he moved into another town more famously known as Slums. From his inhabitants of Slums, Zeno soon moved to another town named Fantastic in February of 2018, where there he was given co-mayor, and during his stay, he began to work on his bills, town invites, and other activities that helped this town grow. He soon began to dedicate more time to Towny once the A1 Craft server shut down, letting him focus on the town more. ZenoBlaze later on inherited the nation of Halcyon, which was the nation that Fantastic and Slums was part of at the time, from the previous owner, 11K. However, there was trouble already brewing. On August 25th, 2018, the town of Perfection was deleted suspiciously. The town balance was drawn out and the town fell, which then the mayor at the time, Pongao, posted a form describing the event as shown here. While it is most likely that somebody infiltrated the town and drained all the money out of it, causing it to fall, what caused an outbreak of trouble was when the notoriously infamous Vanguard nation celebrated the town's demise, in which ZenoBlaze led Halcyon into the Vanguardian Halcyon War. This wall of early Vanguardian history further explains that side of the story. Along during this time, ZenoBlaze also acquired the land that would later become the place we call /T-Spawn Museum, and the Warp Museum as well. These are the early pictures of the museum, in which you can just see how empty it was before things started to get brought in, and you can see that the bridge and the statue Zeno has not been built yet. At this time, it was not called Museum. It was technically called Blaze Empire, referencing of course his name. ZenoBlaze left Halcyon for Vanguard because of how Halcyon was inactive, and Vanguard had a more active base. He gave the position of leader away to a random person and joined Vanguard, alongside other members that he knew such as Itani and Thy Darkrai. From this, he was given Co-King in Vanguard, and soon was involved in the building of it from there on, and helping with many of their projects. But there is something that does need to be addressed. The common belief in Exalted to some people is that ZenoBlaze is a Nazi just simply because he joined the Vanguard, was in the high ranks, and in these pictures partook in a couple of activities. However, ZenoBlaze states he never took any of it seriously and didn't really join in with the intentions of partaking in the more extreme of activities, such as he describes as cross-burning and persecution. But Vanguard's position only lasted so long, as soon the leaders at the time, Asian Lad and Snook OG, were later permanently banned and blacklisted from the server, with Yai, the server manager at the time, almost ready to delete Vanguard, until a nation's staff drained the nation's bank, leading it to collapse on January 2nd, 2019. From there was the huge Vanguard migration to Empire that took place, and ZenoBlaze of course partook in this. From there, Empire acquired ZenoBlaze into their ranks, and soon they boomed with the huge influx. And with ZenoBlaze, he helped design Empire's flags, major recruitments, and build many map arts that we see today. Now despite this boom, there was obviously the unfathomable root of nations that were doing almost the same annoying thing that kinda now pisses people off. Splitting off from Empire. You know, such as the nations like Syndria, Burrito Nation, Thalor. This isn't a necessarily bad thing, but they always profess to be better, the alternative, or something other that is not Empire. And ZenoBlaze even claimed that it was pretty gay. Nevertheless, Empire was the head nation of the server, and despite all the forms of bullshit that went on, like Syndria's Grease or the drama of Burrito Nation, it just pressed on. And from there, ZenoBlaze was involved in the usual activities throughout the rest of 2019 and May of 2020. ZenoBlaze was denounced for his actions and hostility to smaller nations, in which, as this post suggests, and was kicked out of the co-king position on March 15, 2020. On May 29, 2020, ZenoBlaze attempted a solo coup d'etat and successfully became king of Empire for a very short time. Unfortunately, his actions were not tolerated well, and ZenoBlaze was obviously banned on May 29 by the Towny manager, Pebbles, for the abuse of exploits. Now, what is this exploit, you may ask? Well, but with this pretty mutinous exploit, it was patched within a short time, until 3 months later, in which Empire was sabotaged again, and disbanded, which we will explain in the next video, why it kind of correlates to a more important issue. But back on track, what were his intentions of this move? He states that, I was tired of Empire being inactive, and no more recruiting and projects, but I cared too much about numbers. Unfortunately, ZenoBlaze's situation worsened as 9 days later on June 7th, he was blacklisted from the server. During that week, there was a map art movement during the temporary map art wipe, in which there was a map art overriding other map arts. This map art had a picture of ZenoBlaze's head with the word unremovable written above his head, probably signifying that ZenoBlaze will not be removed or forgotten on the server. But this map art debacle passed on once the wipe took place and all the maps were completely reset. And the maps with this art were dropped, or only the main ones existed, or some that had been already updated. But as for his museum, ZenoBlaze appointed 10,000X as a new curator, which you can see as one of his alts of 10,000Y was put in place. And as of late August, the Purge has claimed ZenoBlaze, for he no longer registers within the system. And for ZenoBlaze himself, he now plays on the server known as MinePro, in which he has set up his third museum in the Empire 2.0. Along with that, he has set up a Discord showing the history of Exalted from 2017 to now with the help of the community. It is a beautiful sight to see of the rich culture of Exalted, with this community helping posting information and pictures of it. ZenoBlaze will be missed, and nobody can replace him with his piece of history. If you ever do go to Zeno's museum, which you still can, you will find a slew of things ranging from heads to items to flags to history that is marked alongside these artifacts. And at some point during your visit, you might ask yourself, how did he get all this? Where did he get it? Was it even possible? With that being asked, here's what can be explained, and what he does say. ZenoBlaze actually started the map art industry of Exalted. Before he did, there was only one map art that wasn't even finished. He made several arts at the time, and soon started gaining the attraction of others who wanted to join on in it, and it created a slew of different arts and masterpieces like Empire recruitment arts, the hentai we have, the general art style, many noticeable figures, and many other kinds. This is how we got such a huge variance from a multitude of different players across several years. Before, of course, the temporary map art wipe and the deleting of all these arts in the wipe. Now, the map arts aren't the only maps within the museum. There are also regular maps of lands and towns that are both known and forgotten, Some are glitched out mansions. Some are maps of the end. Some are just a couple words. Some of these are considerable, as some have gone to the size of 7x7 maps. Pretty big. And some of the maps are areas that have either been updated or no longer there. But unfortunately, all these maps were destroyed during the wipe, so there's nothing to really recover. Now, that's just one part of the museum. The rest of it is just full of a lot of stuff you can always see. Flags, heads, items, even armor sets. According to ZenoBlaze, he values these items based on the emotional and historical value that they bring. So, a piece of dirt named Poop would obviously be worthless, unless the course was renamed by like Lolu, Itani, Brandon, or some big name player in bold letters or some color. Maps work a similar way, but they are a lot more complex regarding their usage of colors. Flags portray the towns, nations, and groups they once served, especially ones that rarely exist, like concept flags. Heads are also an interesting subject, because Xeno states that he either finds heads in raids, or was given the heads directly. Blacklisted heads are considerably lucky, since it's virtually impossible to get more than what is given. But he states that either he finds them, or he gets them from these players before they kicked out. On top of all that, you might be asking, well, what about all that offensive stuff he likes to hang? Well, here's the thing that makes him more of a niche in terms of the server, and all its other museums. ZenoBlaze was given permission by Titanic Freak himself to show these items if they were put into a proper zone that specifically held appropriate items, and which they are. However, I would like to stress that do not try this idea out for your own museum. I learned it the hard way when hanging up a map art that got me one day banned just because somebody got offended by it and called up a staff member. With all of this being said, thank you to ZenoBlaze for willing to do his own biography, and to give his story of his 2.5 years of Exalted history. If you did enjoy this, do join his Discord server here, which will be linked in the description to the Towny archives. With that all, do the usual YT bullshit, and do subscribe so you can scream at me for making you look bad. Next topic will be mainly on The Purge. And other topics like the current economy and the wipe. See you then!